This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jasperson.
Boy, a lot can change in just a few days. Welcome to Real Talk. This episode on this July 24th, we're going to dig into the entirely dramatically different landscape of the presidential race. Of course, since we last spoke with you, since Friday's episode, what was that, Johnny? The 19th of July, when we welcomed Canadian Senator Paula Simons, an independent senator out of Alberta, to the Real Talk studio for what proved to be quite a long-form interview. And boy, did she get into a whole bunch of stuff. We didn't expect her to be like opening up expense reports and talking about senators' salaries. It was just an absolutely fantastic, candid conversation to pull back the curtain just a little bit without betraying anybody's trust. But
go check it out.
Yeah, when the senator stood up to leave, I said, "What did you think?" Because sometimes after interviews, you get in this and then it's just like it's just happening. It's like, once a tornado touches down and you look around, and you say, "Is everybody okay?"
We ditched the script.
I said we took it. We didn't even look at the script, and we did have one, but it was kind of like a little bit static and maybe a tiny bit boring. And she's a former journalist, and so we tell politics. But then she just started freewheeling. And at the end of the interview, I said, "What did you think? How did you feel? How did it go?" And she goes, "Well," she said, "I thought it was really good." She goes, "I love your audience." We were reading some live chat stuff, and the senator goes, "I'm not sure my team's going to be thrilled about me talking so much about expenses and salaries." And I thought, who's going to love it, though, is the audience.
Yeah, they are.
We're going to love that. And so if you missed that episode, make sure you check it out. But she prognosticated on something, and in just a second we'll get to that. I mean, she it's almost like she called it, the senator did, and you may roll your eyes and say, well, this is like the most captain obvious thing. But she pointed out how this presidential race could look dramatically different by November 5th than it did on the day we were talking. Well, 5 days later, here we are, and we're about to dig into this with Charles Adler. Joe Biden out. You've obviously heard that by now. Kamala Harris, it looks like, is going to be, sort of leading the charge in what will be a bit of a shortened time frame. You remember that George Clooney New York Times editorial we talked about, the Hollywood A-lister saying, it doesn't matter if there's not much time to make Harris the nominee. He says that could be an advantage for the Democrats. So we'll pick Adler's brain on that, see how he feels about it. Plus, we have an update on the Jasper wildfire. This is brutal. Typically on Wednesdays, we'll bring you my Jasper memories. The fact of the matter is the entire town of Jasper and everybody in and around there has been evacuated as wildfires threatening the town. Crews are working overtime. We know some people working on those fire crews. We know a lot of people that have been evacuated, and we'll have an update on that fire for you. Plus a tribute to a magnificent pop coming up in Positive Reflections presented by our friends at Kuby Energy. Before we get to Charles Adler, I want to let you know that this episode is happening with the support of HRO Training. If you're working in this line of work for a high reliability organization, I don't have to tell you that your number one job is to prioritize a culture where safety is intrinsic, not an afterthought. And this is a great opportunity for you to start your organization's journey to a safer future with a webinar coming up on August 2nd. You can find all the details at hro.training/webinars. This is ensuring safety excellence, overcoming contractor management challenges. You're going to hear from Chris Labossiere, CEO of We Know Training, and Rob Stewart, an applied behavioral scientist, a psychologist, and he's the subject matter expert behind this HRO professional roadmap to high professional safety webinar. Here's the deal. Coming up August 2nd at 11 o'clock Mountain, 1 o'clock Eastern time. You can save 20% off this. You want to make sure maybe your whole team, or at least everybody involved in the safety culture, in facilitating that safety culture as a part of this. You can knock 20% off that course by using the promo code Ryan20 during checkout. Save 20% off this webinar by using Ryan20 during checkout when you visit hro.training/webinars. So we love when we can say on this show, any political talk show loves to be able to say, told you so, or they called it, whether it's the host, the producer, the guest, whatever it is. And before we get to Charles Adler, here's a quick snippet. This is the short that Johnny put together. Make sure you follow us. You can see these on TikTok, our Instagram Reels, or our YouTube Shorts. Typically the best or most attention-grabbing 60 seconds of every show. Here's July 19th with Senator Simons.
Joe Biden has COVID. Trump survived an assassination attempt. Is it possible that by November, it's Kamala Harris versus JD Vance? That's not impossible. We have no idea what is coming, but what is coming is going to shake the foundations of the way that the Western Alliance has run since 1946. And I think that as Canadians, it's imprudent of us to just snark or cast stones. We need to be mindful every step we take from now till November, every step we take from November for the next 4 years. How are we protecting Canada's economy? How are we protecting our sovereignty? How are we protecting our future in the world?
That was Senator Paula Simons on this show just 5 days ago, as we welcome, as we do the first episode of every week, presented by Tice Automotive Consulting, talk radio legend Charles Adler. It's nice to see your face, pal. What do you make of Senator Simons' call there?
Well, I love Paula Simons, have for a long time, and anytime you get Paula Simons as a guest, that's wonderful. But I got to tell you, when Paula Simons says none of us should be, snarking or throwing stones, I ask myself whether or not I should just recuse myself from this session, because snarking and stone throwing has been good to me and probably good to you, Ryan. But we can get past that and just kind of be honorable.
Well, it's been good until it's not been good. You might suggest some of life's tougher moments with me have been when I've been snarky and throwing stones. But I digress. Yes. I'll take your point.
You and I get into a little bit of
sure,
trouble on the snarky side of life.
Sure,
but I do think, as far as entertainment factor goes, I think people enjoy a little bit of snark. But just to be serious for a few moments, I do think that it affects Canada and the entire Western Alliance. Who sits in the Oval Office really matters. I don't think there was much doubt on your part or mine that the Biden train was chugging slowly and more slowly and more slowly every day. And I don't think either of us believed that by the time it would come to the nomination and putting someone at the top of the ticket, I don't think either of us believed that he wouldn't be replaced. I mean, that was, when Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama and George Clooney get together to make something happen, it does.
So you get you're in a scenario now where people like this isn't a guarantee, although for all intents and purposes it appears as though it will be. Joe Biden, who we should be very clear has not resigned as president of the United States.
No.
Some people are suggesting he should, by the way, and there may be some strategy there. But he has endorsed Vice President Harris for his pick as the Democratic nominee. All signs point to that being the case, and political pundits, most especially stateside, describing this as smooth sailing for Harris, securing that nomination. People are talking about who she may pick as her running mate, who she'd like to see as VP. Why don't we talk about the nomination first? The assumption is everywhere is that she secures it. Can you see a world where she doesn't?
No, and I don't want to, sometimes people want to get into all the bowels of public policy and the weeds, and I know 1 or 2% of the audience likes to hear it, but there has been enough confirmation from actual delegates in actual states that has confirmed for everyone, without getting into the weeds, that you can take this to the bank. Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee for president.
So we got some interesting comments, and I'm happy to see the Real Talk live chat here all fired up. Great to have everybody here, and they're saying, listen, this is basically like this is all going to come down to the swing states, and she's got some solid choices for running mates that could help her out in those swing states. I'm curious for your analysis how you think this impacts the race. Like so what changes when it goes from Biden v. Trump to Harris v. Trump? The Donald loses his ammunition on the Sleepy Joe narrative. He can still hit Vice President Harris on the record of this administration. And obviously, I'm sure that he'll have some gems. I say it facetiously in how he'll characterize this new nominee and how he'll refer to her. I'm sure he's working on a whole plethora, a new quiver of nicknames, if you will. But how does this change the race? How does this change the dynamic? How does this change Trump's plan of attack?
So I've been a long believer in television, in video, in how it guides people's emotions. And I've said from time to time that people vote with their eyes. So when people voted with their eyes were more pleased with Barack Obama than they were with Mitt Romney. And when people voted with their eyes, they were more pleased with Bill Clinton than they were with George H.W. Bush. And I think many people, especially people who are relatively undecided, relatively nonpartisan, sometimes relatively uninterested in politics, they just see every political brand, as a product. I think when many of them vote with their eyes, I think Kamala Harris is easier on their eyes than Donald Trump.
Let's go to this, Chuck. This is Kamala Harris just a very short time ago, essentially describing or touching on or addressing exactly what we're getting to, exactly what everybody's talking about right now.
And in this campaign, I promise you, I will proudly put my record against his any day of the week. As Attorney General of California, I took on one of our country's largest for-profit colleges that was scamming students. Donald Trump ran a for-profit college that scammed students. As a prosecutor, I specialized in cases involving sexual abuse. Well, Trump was found liable for committing sexual abuse. As Attorney General of California, I took on the big Wall Street banks and held them accountable for fraud. Donald Trump was just found guilty of fraud on 34 counts. But let's also make no mistake, this campaign is not just about us versus Donald Trump. This campaign is about who we fight for. This is about who we fight for. Just look at how we are running our campaigns. So Donald Trump is relying on support from billionaires and big corporations. And he is trading access in exchange for campaign contributions. A couple months ago, y'all saw that a couple months ago at Mar-a-Lago, he literally promised big oil companies, big oil lobbyists, he would do their bidding for $1 billion in campaign donations. On the other hand, we are running a people-powered campaign. And we just had some breaking news. We just had the best 24 hours of grassroots fundraising in presidential campaign history. All right? And because we are a people-powered campaign, that is how you know we will be a people-first presidency.
People first presidency, Kamala Harris there. You can see she's finding that sweet spot or seeking the sweet spot about 34 counts. I love the voice in the crowd. You heard it. Lock him up. Lock him up. I don't know why it's taken someone so long to start yelling "lock him up." Maybe it hasn't. But she says. But then she finds where I do think she needs to go, because the pundits in polling have both proven that Trump voters don't actually care about the felony count. They don't actually care about the conviction. That doesn't. It's not. It seems strange. Right. It seems so strange to the casual observer, but that actually doesn't matter. And she'll have to make this campaign about more than Donald Trump. And I think it's a step in the right direction. Do you agree?
Well, I absolutely agree. Barack Obama made his campaign about hope and change. And I know that there are people listening and watching who love the bashing and the trashing and the negativity. And it's all over for America and Canada is broken and blah, blah, blah. But many people just get so annoyed and tired with that. One of the reasons is because they've got children and or grandchildren. And so that's called the future. And most of the time in retail politics, those candidates who stand for the future and have a positive, repeat, energetic and positive vision of the future do better than the old, tired and annoying grumps.
Look at that. I'm sorry. I just got caught up on the live chat for a second. Chuck, I know you don't need your tires pumped, but I'm just saying, like, so I'm reading for takes on the race here. But Cheryl outside just checked in, says, I'm so excited to be here today. She says, I've been dying to hear Charles Adler's take on the presidential election with a new Democratic nominee, though not yet official. There you go. Lauren says, no doubt Kamala will hammer his character. Chad says, I'm going to be watching the next debate for sure. Man, why don't we touch on Chad's comment there for a second? I mean, we can agree, and it was tough to watch. It was tough to watch Joe Biden's performance. I mean, both of their performance, but he made Trump look good. His regrettable performance in the last debate, that was what sealed it. That was what everybody was referencing. It was that more than anything else. Harris is going to give Trump a run for his money. This may be delicate subject matter, but let me ask you, as we look back to 2015 in Alberta, Jim Prentice, Rachel Notley. If Jim Prentice had told a male NDP leader, if Jim Prentice had told Brian Mason that math is hard, it would not have even registered, let alone resonated.
We wouldn't have even used the clip.
It wouldn't have even used the clip. Nobody would have cared one bit. But because it was a middle-aged white guy saying it to a woman, it was a devastating blow to the PCs. It landed with a thud. How did the gender and ethnic implications of this nomination, if any, how does it impact the race? I mean, I see people talking about this. People are saying a black woman could be president of the United States. This is like the Barack Obama story. This is the hope story. Is it?
Look, when people ask me about that in general, I ask them how they feel about Michelle Obama and Oprah Winfrey. And people say, oh, well, if Oprah Winfrey, especially a number of years ago, if Oprah Winfrey had run for president, no problem. Is Oprah Winfrey not a black woman? Michelle Obama, most popular personality in the United States as of right now, she still is number one. If she were running, nobody can touch her in the swing states. In any state, she'd have a landslide. When did Michelle Obama stop being a black woman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair. Interesting comment here from Todd, who says there will not be another debate. There's no way Donald Trump agrees to another debate. All the online news outlets are writing about it, are wondering about it. Trump's called for the next debate to be held on Fox News, so it sounds like he's not completely ruled it out. It's a tough look for him. It's a bad look for him if he doesn't agree. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, the subtext of the entire campaign is, Kamala Harris is a socialist. Kamala Harris is a woman. Kamala Harris is a woman of color. She's not what America wants. America wants a strong white guy. Blah 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 blah. If that's the subtext of the entire Republican campaign, there's nothing that would look weaker than Donald Trump saying he won't debate Kamala Harris.
80s Fanify in the chat says, vote for a felon or a prosecutor. Tough choice indeed. When you frame it like that, sure. So here you have it. This injects some new life into the Democrats. Obviously, I mean, some wind into their sails, some new life into the campaign. There will be some questions, as there are when it's a new face, although it's not an unknown. I mean, she's served as the vice president of the United States. She's had a formidable and impressive career up to this point. Do the Democrats lose support on any front, as far as you can see?
No, I can't. And there are three areas as a triangle. We talk about the triangle in Alberta. There's you got to get Edmonton, you got to get Calgary, You got to get rural Alberta. Those are the Ralph Klein talked about it, and everybody since him have talked about it. So there's the triangle in the Democratic Party for the coalition that you absolutely need. So you need women, you need youth, and you need minorities, generally meaning blacks and Hispanics. So there's a sense of confidence in the air right now, and it's not hype. It really is real confidence. And of course, it's matched up by a couple of $100 million of donations since Sunday. $200 million US is not nothing. So the truth is, the reason for the confidence is because that coalition, that three-legged stool, minorities, youth, women, those are demographics that Kamala Harris can do extremely well in.
For folks' interest, anybody that's listening to this around July 24th, when we're having this conversation, obviously we're going to talk about information that is dynamic and that is often changing, but Forbes reporting, you can check it out at Forbes.com, latest survey showing a virtual tie in the presidential race after Joe Biden dropping out just a couple of days ago. Vice President Harris leading former President Trump by 2 points. In one of the first new polls that were taken, she trails by 2 points, and another trails by 1 point in a third. So in the Reuters Ipsos poll conducted Monday and Tuesday, just right before we're talking here on this Wednesday morning, she's up 44% to 42 among 1,000 or so registered voters. She leads by a wider margin by 4 points in a hypothetical matchup when RFK Jr. is on the ballot. He polls about 8%. And this is kind of an interesting note as well. In stark contrast with sentiment surrounding Biden's mental fitness, 56% of eligible registered voters say that Harris is mentally sharp, able to deal with challenges, compared to 49% who said the same about Donald Trump. So she's got a decent spread there.
And I know we were talking about this last week, when all the Biden stuff was going on, it's over, the assassination attempt, it's over. But I agree. I think it's a whole new ballgame here. NPR, I was just looking this morning, they're polling from even before where they were asking voters, hey, if Biden dropped out and Harris became the nominee.
Hypothetical.
Yeah. And the polls stayed the same. It's pretty much 50-50. It's a little one way or the other, but pretty much down the middle. But just from that clip, Ryan, she's not going to, pardon my language, fuck around. She's going right to the stuff that keeps the wind in his sails immediately. And I think that's the way, if Harris is going to beat Trump, that she does it. Go for the stuff she knows he's going to come for the jugular for her before he even gets to it. And I also saw a great TikTok. I wish I had downloaded it about how, a large percentage of boomers who voted in 2016 have passed away or are at the age where they might not even vote anymore or get out to the polls. And a large percentage of Gen Z who couldn't vote in 2016 have now become voting age. And a large percentage of those Gen Zs are left.
But you're right, and I agree with you. But building off that point, Chuck, we've often, we hear this every single election. Whether this is we're paying attention over in Europe or we're paying attention to provincial or federal elections here in Canada or the United States. Everybody always says if they can just mobilize the youth, if they can get out youth voters, and guess what? It's really tough to get out young voters. Really tough to get out young voters. They get excited. They'll go to rallies. They'll wear the T-shirts. They'll post on Instagram. But when it comes time to actually go stand in a line and vote, very few of them, statistically and historically speaking, will actually do it. So you've got an interesting dynamic here. Sorry to cut you off, Chuck, but you got a dynamic here where two things have happened to inject huge energy in, pardon the phrase, both sides. Donald Trump, by inches, survives an assassination attempt. And what happens? It mobilizes his base, and the fundraising goes. And then days later, you have Joe Biden drop out of the race, and you've got Kamala Harris here, likely the Democratic nominee. Both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, are seeing huge boosts here. This is wild. This is back-to-back rocket boosters in a presidential race with just weeks to go. November 5th, they vote.
Ryan, do you mind if I get into a little bit of elasticity and expand that conversation about youth? Because I don't think it goes quite deep enough. It is absolutely true that youth don't turn out like their parents don't turn out in numbers like their grandparents. I mean, I get that. But Kamala Harris is really giving youth great TikTok. Beyonce has now given the Harris campaign permission to use Beyonce's Freedom, so that will be the theme. I have zero doubt that Taylor Swift will be on side. I have zero doubt that Kamala Harris will draw much more youth than Joe Biden would have.
Yeah, but Trump has Hulk Hogan, buddy.
Yeah, oh my God,
brother.
If I tore my shirt off during this podcast, my guess is I'd never be invited back. But
yeah, I mean, don't worry about it. Yeah,
Hulk. All right.
It's okay. Just keep your shirt on. Yeah.
Here's the other piece about youth that needs to be said. Youth have a great influence on their parents.
Yep.
I'm not saying that parents consult youth before making the vote, but they have a great deal of influence. Mums and dads and uncles and aunts. And if they're hearing their young people, the young people in their lives, getting a buzz off someone in politics, someone in public service, that buzz can be contagious. Very few politicians, Canada or the United States, have done poorly in retail politics when there was a surge of youth vote. Youth influence their mums and dads.
100% agree. We're talking to Charles Adler. If you're just tuning in, live streaming on the Mixler audio app presented by California Closets, I want to ask you about the other side. In particular, we talk a lot about Donald Trump, but not a lot about JD Vance. And I know that there's something you want to touch on. Plus, we're going to draw our attention a little closer to home. A story of, well, do you call it scandal? It sure appears to be that way, relating to the Edmonton Oilers Stanley Cup run, and it's running all the way up to the Premier's office, plus the Edmonton Oilers with a controversial hire today.
I saw that.
Bringing on Stan Bowman, who's been out of the league for the last couple of years, former general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks. More with Charles Adler coming up in just a moment. As you know, Adler's appearances on Real Talk are made possible by the team at Tice Automotive Consulting. The team at Tice, led by Chris Fisher. This guy's an absolute beauty, a business owner and entrepreneur that figured something out early. He figured out that buying a vehicle should be fun, and not everybody feels that buying a vehicle is fun. So Chris, who has a background as a heavy-duty and light-duty mechanic, founded Tice. It makes buying a used or new vehicle easy. They fill in the gaps that can make a buying experience stressful, and they transform it into one that's worry-free. Here's the hypothetical for you. You need a new vehicle, but you got a full-time job. You don't have time to go to the car dealership, or you're looking after your kids, or quite frankly, the last time you went into a car dealership, you were worried you were going to get ripped off the entire time. So you get in touch with Tice and you say, here's my budget, here's the type of car I want, here's the color I want, here's what it's got to have, here's what it can't have, and then Tice goes to work. They source out the perfect vehicle for you. They complete the exhaustive mechanical inspection, and they deliver your vehicle right to your door for a reasonable fee, which is clearly laid out on their website, ticeautomotive.com. That's where you can learn more. That's where you can make contact. Plus, you can subscribe and sign up for services. You need an oil change through the year. You need your tires rotated. They'll come pick up your car and get it done for you without hesitation, without reservation. We endorse and suggest Tice Automotive Consulting at ticeautomotive.com. If you're looking for a change of pace, if you're looking to better yourself, if you're looking to level up your learning for a competitive and promising job market, take 2 seconds today to learn about the AU Advantage at athabascau.ca. Athabasca University has world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education whenever and wherever it works for you. You need to take off on a vacation? No problem. Mental health break? You got it. Heck, you want to fast forward ahead in your studies? You can do that too, because the AU Advantage is all about your education, your way. You can apply today at athabascau.ca. And if you're looking to get the family together through barbecue season for some quality time and the food needs to match, let's get grilling at Friesen Brothers. If you check out Friesen.com, that's Freson.com, you can check out the special recipes they've got featured, all highlighting those Alberta proteins prepared by their real Alberta butchers. They've got recipes there for all kinds of things, mains, side dishes, salads, whatever it is on order, Friesen Brothers has you covered. And of course, don't forget, the first of every month, 15% off all grocery purchases of $75 or more in 17 different locations across the province. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And if you have resolved to use this summer to get organized, to declutter, you're not going to go through another fall, another winter with a garage that you can't make your way through, with a basement you can't navigate, and with a closet that's completely disorganized, why not request a free consultation with California Closets? They've got a design team and an installation team second to none, with quality work that is guaranteed for life. They can take a look at your budget, they'll take a look at your timeline, and they'll tell you what they can do to work magic, transforming your space for peace of mind, not to mention the increased value. You can check out actual customer feedback on their website and learn more about what goes in to booking California Closets for a custom closet or storage solution. Again, that's a free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. So everybody knows Donald Trump, obviously one of the most recognizable celebrities in the world before he was elected president of the United States, let alone now. But it's his running mate that folks don't know as much about, JD Vance. And Charles, I bet a lot of people have been doing a lot of Googling, but you seem unimpressed. Johnny, can we tee up a clip before we get your take on it, Charles? We'll let the audience know. This is a particular speech or a portion of a speech that Chuck asked us to load up. And so we're about to find out why. But first, here's JD Vance.
It is the weirdest thing to me. Democrats say that it is racist to believe, well, they say it's racist to do anything. I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday and one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too, but it's good. I love you guys. But
Okay. Chuck, why did you want us to pull the clip about Mountain Dew?
Because he is from Middletown, Ohio, okay? Bordering on Appalachia, and his whole thing has been he's a guy who came from Appalachia and made good at Yale, but he's never forgetting his roots. He respects his roots. He loves his roots. But he's like so many people who, they have spent some time in a small town, but they're constantly making fun of those folks without even knowing it. They're constantly putting down those people without knowing it. They're hicks. They're hillbillies. They live in the sticks. They drink Mountain Dew. They don't drink Mountain Dew. They don't. And so when he says that, the reason he's just getting one or two supporters laughing, they're trying to be kind to him. The message falls absolutely flat. That speech was so flat, and I was watching it on Fox. I couldn't believe that Fox did this to a vice presidential candidate right out of the chute. I've never seen them do anything like this. So a Republican vice presidential candidate who has just been selected is doing a speech in his hometown. Fox actually cut away. Why did they cut away? Because JD Vance was shooting blanks. Because JD Vance wasn't even connecting with Middletown, Ohio. If he can't connect with his own hometown, he's a dud. D-U-D.
How much does a running mate, how much does a nominee for vice president actually matter? When you have a personality as huge as Donald Trump's, could he run? I mean, we're talking about a guy that ran Mike Pence. We're talking about a guy that ran the most milquetoast, white bread, mama's sweet sauce, boring candidate. I'm not trying to be an asshole. He just was the most boring. Like, it was almost like sort of like a, Earth to Pence type situation. Like, was he a robot? We don't know. You get the idea. You get how I feel. Hardly inspiring. Nobody cared. How much does it matter?
The reason this guy matters isn't because he does flat speeches. I'm sure his speeches will get a little better. He'll be a little better on the stump than he is right now. But the reason he matters is because of what he represents, especially on the abortion issue. And there is zero doubt that the Democrats will do what they can to turn out the women vote, and people who respect women, and people who respect rights, and people who respect the Supreme Court that they used to have. I have no doubt that they'll be using JD Vance on that, because JD Vance on abortion is really bad news. JD Vance is even bad news on this other thing that Project 2025, I don't want to get into the weeds of that. It's a heritage think tank thing with all these Trump people and former Trump people involved in trying to create a new American Revolution, which would take the United States, I guess, back to 1776. But JD Vance is also interested in having discussions about how families should stay together even when there is spousal abuse. I said spousal abuse. I said wife beating. Even if a man is beating his own wife, they should stay together in the interests of the kids. Now, I realize that this was a discussion that was relatively popular when I was a kid, which was a long time ago. But to discuss that in any kind of positive frame in 2024 is kind of nutty. And I think JD Vance is a little bit nutty. He's very intelligent, but like a lot of intelligent people, he's got a little bit of nuttiness there. And I do think the Democrats have an opportunity to make hay on that, especially when it comes to the women demographic, which is all important. Look, I'll give you one number here. 90% of black women in America vote. If 90% of American women were to vote, Donald Trump wouldn't have a chance in hell. Much of this campaign is going to be about getting out as many women as possible. If Kamala Harris's campaign can get out 5% more women than Hillary Clinton's campaign was able to harvest, there's no doubt in my mind that Kamala Harris is the next president of the United States.
Yeah, I wonder if JD Vance's nuttiness might actually help him. Like, considering what seems to resonate, I'm not convinced that nuttiness is a disqualifying factor here. In the meantime, Daniel in our chat says nutty might be being nice as a descriptor. Wise Kyle in the chat says this is going to be a very funny show on November 6th. We will be here on November 6th, obviously, regardless of what happens here. I remember doing talk radio the morning after Trump won the first time, beating Hillary. I remember being at an election night party, as a matter of fact. For once, we weren't the ones hosting it, at an election night party, and there were the party organizers did kind of a cool thing. There were like these two punch bowls, Johnny, at the entrance to the party. And Charles, they had Trump buttons and they had Hillary buttons, and people could choose whatever they wanted to put on. And as the night went on, there were fewer and fewer Hillary buttons at the host bar, and the Trump buttons were surrounding the host bar by the end. You'll remember that election was called relatively early in the night. And I remember doing talk shows the next day. And, of course, as is often the case in any election, we'll expect to see the same the next Canadian election, however that may go. But you'll have in this case, the supporters of whoever wins gloating and the others going, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disastrous next 4 years. But I will say this to Wise Kyle and everybody else. Not just my assumption, but my public proclamation up until a few days ago was that Trump will run away with this election. And while now I find it a little bit more difficult to prognosticate, a little bit more difficult to predict the outcome of this election, it's not going to be a runaway situation anymore. Not a chance. What do you think?
Well, it's hard to make any prediction when we don't know who her running mate is. When you say stuff like,
I don't think it matters.
When you say stuff like Oprah Winfrey Harris, I mean, I think that's a lock versus Vance Trump.
I think it should be the other way around.
Or when you say things like what if it was Michelle Obama and Harris? That would be absolutely insane, and that's a lock too. So I think the one advantage that Harris has right now is picking her running mate and that being someone exceptional, possibly maybe even another woman. Then you'd have the first two women, president and vice president. But there's a lot of factors. But again, I'm glad that Charles brought it up, because I think Winfrey Harris would just be.
This is not happening. Is this happening, Charles?
But hey, we've seen crazier things lately in America.
Sure,
right?
Sure, 100%.
Is it The Rock and Kamala Harris? I don't know. No, I'm just The Rock's a Republican, but yeah, he leans right. So yeah,
okay. I don't know if The Rock is the type to get political yet. No. Although I do think he has his eyes on the Oval Office.
But you know what I mean? Maybe she goes for the celeb pick. Maybe she goes for the outlandish pick because she's against Trump, right?
I don't know. Does she go for the celebrity pick, Chuck?
I think she'll go for a white male. One of her favorite people is Roy Cooper of North Carolina. Mark Kelly, a former astronaut, is a senator from Arizona, very attractive. Josh Shapiro governor of Pennsylvania, attractive. Boring compared to Michelle Obama, boring compared to Oprah Winfrey, boring compared to Beyonce, boring compared to The Rock. Absolutely. But I'm just saying that the chances are that she will do a much more traditional pick, and a much more traditional pick is white male. But I want to remind you that Donald Trump put age, into the mix. And in some people's minds, age became the number one issue. And it became the number one issue for several months. Donald Trump may regret making age an issue.
Chuck, before we let you go, I got to ask you about a story closer to home. And by the way, we're going to be going to the White House in just a second with Wyatt Sharpe, the intrepid teenage talk show host. He's down at the White House right now, so we'll get his take on all of this. But Chuck, first, we want to turn our attention to the Alberta legislature, in particular, eyes on the Premier's office right now, as Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, some of her senior staffers, and some cabinet ministers, including the Minister of Sport and Tourism, Joseph Scow, are being criticized for not necessarily violating or breaking ethics rules, but maybe taking on a bit of a bad look, accepting free hockey tickets, accepting tickets in particular to luxury suites through the Oilers playoff run. It's not necessarily exclusively or just the fact that they accepted the hockey tickets, but who some of the tickets were from. Most notably, an executive with the company connected to the Tylenol story. That's the $75 million purchase of Turkish Tylenol that didn't go very long. Didn't go very far. Obviously cost Alberta taxpayers with very limited return on investment. So it's a tough look for Alberta's premier. We suspect that more details will come out on this story, but how is it landing with you right now in the early days? We know a lot of journalists are working hard behind the scenes on this one.
Well, tickets from the person who made money off the Turkish Tylenol. That's got a political whiff that I don't think is terribly attractive. It's malodorous, okay? Here's the deal. The UCP and, of course, Danielle Smith and members of the UCP always want to play this game about how they're just like the folks. They're just about the grassroots. They're not special. They're not for the elites. Conservatives like throwing out this term elite all the time. I'm sorry, it's kind of elitist to be getting a freebie in the luxury box, and not just during any game, during a playoff game. People who are among the grassroots have a very tough time scraping up the kind of dough to attend a playoff game in Edmonton, even if it's in the cheap seats, never mind the luxury suite. So if you're asking me if this is a good look for the Danielle Smith UCP, I'd say no. It's a very, very bad look. It'll be interesting to see what Nenshi makes of this and how he cobbles together his attack.
Yeah, I mean, he's already hitting them hard on Twitter for this. The premier in front of a microphone with her deputy premier, who's also Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mike Ellis. We wanted to play a couple of minutes of this. Chuck, we'll get your comment on this. This is where you can feel the awkwardness here for the premier. This is where you kind of get a sense of how problematic this potentially could be. Maybe if it wasn't in the middle of the summer, but I digress. Here we go.
Yesterday, the premier had disclosed she's gone to 3 hockey games as a guest of others, and she had said that it's up to staff and ministers to disclose their own information. So I'm wondering how many games you went to and who hosted you.
1 game hosted by the Edmonton Oilers.
Okay, and for the premier, thank you very much, Minister. For the premier, yesterday you had said that you aren't responsible for your staff when we had asked them, and you had basically said if we had questions for other people, such as ministers and your staff, that we should ask them. We have been asking your staff repeatedly. We have been asking cabinet ministers. If you aren't responsible for the actions of your staff, who is?
Well, let me tell you how the ethics rules work. So first of all,
no, I understand the ethics
No, I don't
rules.
think you do. Because first of all, no government money has been spent on any of the inquiries that you're making. That's number one. Number two, what private individuals choose to do with their private money is not governed by the ethics commissioner. Number three, MLAs do have disclosure requirements. No MLAs are allowed to take private flights. Any expense under $250 does not have to be reported. Expenses of $250 to $1,000 do have to be reported in an annual disclosure to the Ethics Commissioner, and anything above $1,000 has to be reported within 60 days. And so those are the rules, and I expect every staff member and I expect every MLA to follow them.
Premier, you wrote the rules, you rewrote the rules, you made them easier to accept gifts, and your staff does not have to disclose them.
The staff have to disclose to the Chief of Staff, correct?
Right, but
Thank
not
you, Carrie.
to the public.
We're going to go to our next
Will
question
you
here.
disclose to the public what gifts your staff has accepted?
I have arranged a meeting. I've asked for a meeting with the Ethics Commissioner, as has the Chief of Staff to me. And if there are any interpretations that he needs to give me, so that there are any modifications to policy, I'm looking forward to getting his answers. But as I said, I expect all staff and all MLAs to follow the rules.
Thank you, Carrie. Let's go to our next question here.
All right, so there you have it. A shout out to Carrie Tate, who appeared on our show just a short time ago. So this kind of brings me back, Chuck, to that commonly held, tried, tested, and true PR principle. If you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah, no, Danielle Smith, I just have to say it. She's better than that. That was a real political loser. When she has consulted people on how to do their politics, she has told them, when you're explaining, you're losing. And when you can't answer a simple question, who hosted you? How many games did you go to? Who hosted you? And she turns it into this whole ethics cluster. Yeah, she created the rules. And it's not about whether or not she's violating the ethics commissioner rules. It's about whether or not, I'm going to use a term that I used for many years, Canadian common sense. I know it's been adopted now by the Conservative Party and blah, 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 but I'll use it anyway. It just defies common sense that Danielle Smith doesn't want to answer a straight question with a straight answer. Really easy question. It would be a really easy answer, and she could just simply follow up that answer with poor form on my part. I'm sorry.
You can catch Charles Adler the first episode of every week right here on Real Talk, presented by our team at Tice Automotive Consulting. And we don't have to wait long. We'll talk to you next Monday, Chuck.
See you soon.
See you soon, brother. You can let us see you soon, brother. How about that Hulk Hogan performance on the podium? Brother. He took a little longer to find the collar of his T-shirt than he typically does before he shreds him, didn't he? The Danielle Smith story, and it's more than that. It's her staffers, it's ministers. I'm curious to know where you land on this, Real Talkers. Talk at ryanjesperson.com is where you can send us your emails. Ken in the live chat says the ticket value is not the issue. It's the manner of taking tickets to suites from the guy who facilitated a terrible deal for Tylenol that cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. That's basically the story summed up in one sentence. We've got others of you. Justin says, Wild Rose Danielle would be so disappointed in UCP Danielle. Look no further than the Edmonton Sun, where perhaps the most conservative mainstream commentator in the province, Lorne Gunter, the headline reads, Danielle Smith accepting free Oilers tickets leaves a bad taste in many people's mouths. You'll remember, just after the Heritage Classic, pardon me for pointing out another Real Talk scoop, we had the Premier of Alberta in studio, and I asked her, is it true that the Ethics Commission, is it true that you were unable to attend the Heritage Classic, the Edmonton Oilers hosting the Calgary Flames outdoor in an internationally televised spectacle, a sold-out event, like 65,000 people there, Nickelback playing between periods. Is it true that the Premier of Alberta was unable to attend that hockey game? And she said it is. She said, I decided, that is true. She said, I decided not to go after the ethics commissioner told me that I could only spend 20 minutes in a suite. And what did I say? I said, I think that's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. And she said on the show, do you remember this? She said, well, we might have to look at changing that. We might have to look at making some tweaks. And then they went ahead and did it like a week later.
Yeah.
Now, here's my take on this, to be honest with you. The sport minister, Joseph Scow, should he be at hockey games? Probably. Should he be at some of them? Yeah. All of them? No. On the taxpayers' dime? Definitely not. Right? Should the Premier of Alberta be at a playoff game with the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks in a box with the Premier of BC? Yup. Vancouver's mayor was in there as well. Did they talk politics? Presumably. Their teams say that they talked about their shared interests between periods. Does it make sense to have decision makers talking to other decision makers, rubbing shoulders with people of influence? That's kind of how politics works. And if we act like it's not, then we're fooling ourselves. But is it a bad look if the source of tickets, Johnny, the cheapest ticket during the Stanley Cup final, you and I were looking on apps, you and I were looking to source them out everywhere. The cheapest ticket, once you started getting to Game 6 in Edmonton, the Stanley Cup final, the cheapest ticket available was like $1,800.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
I mean, people were paying $2,000, $3,000. I was in an Uber. I told you this story. My Uber driver told me that the ride right before me was 4 guys. They owned car dealerships. Irrelevant, but of interest. 4 guys that had paid $10,000 each for 4 seats in a row. 40 grand, let alone boxes, let alone suites. We have it on Good Word, a reliable source, that luxury boxes were being sold for 6 figures during the Stanley Cup final. So is it a tough look if the Premier or the Premier's staffers or cabinet ministers are there as guests of a person that facilitated a multi-million-dollar, a $75 million boondoggle during COVID? Absolutely. In my mind, it's not necessarily the tickets. It's the source of the tickets that makes this especially bad. Now, how bad is this? How long will this story stick around? Is this something that will hound and hang off of this Premier like the Sky Palace did with Alison Redford, Danielle Smith's recent appointee to the Invest Alberta board? That remains to be seen. Let us know what you think about this. You can send us an email anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We have an amazing opportunity right now to go back to one of our favorites. This is one of the most impressive storytellers in my mind in Canada right now, and not just because he's a high school student. Wyatt Sharpe is host of The Wyatt Sharpe Show. He's a wonderful friend of the show, and he joins us now live from Washington, D.C. This is not a fake background. This is not a green screen. Wyatt Sharpe is joining us from the grounds of the White House. What's shaking, my man? Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Well, what are you down there covering, Wyatt?
Well, what am I down here not covering should be the real question. I mean, there's like so many stories. The Prime Minister of Israel's here. Obviously, the stuff with President Biden. There's an Oval Office address tonight. I mean, I'm probably missing something, but there's a whole wazoo of different things happening here, and so it's certainly very crazy, but very fun at the same time.
Yeah, this visit from Benjamin Netanyahu, an interesting one, as Kamala Harris made news, not by where she showed up, but where she didn't. What jumped out at you?
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. So the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is going to be addressing Congress today at 2 p.m. He's going to be here at the White House tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a bilateral meeting with Joe Biden. But the part I find super interesting, as you alluded to, is the fact that Kamala Harris, the vice president, who is now the presumptive Democratic nominee, given that President Biden has withdrew from the ticket, that she's opted not to attend the joint session, the joint address today by the Israeli Prime Minister, which is not very typical. Usually the vice president will be in attendance, whether it be her being in attendance for when the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, made a similar joint address. So certainly the optics here, her office blaming it on a scheduling conflict. And in all fairness, she is in Indiana and Houston over the course of today. So that is perhaps part of it. But usually for things like that, you might try and carve out a little bit of time. So it perhaps speaks to the fact that maybe under a Harris presidency, there would be a bit of a change in course surrounding the issue of the war in Israel and Gaza. I was talking to Mehdi Hassan recently. He was saying how he believes President Biden has been one of the most pro-Israeli presidents of our lifetime, of his lifetime. I assume a little bit longer than mine, but certainly, I mean, there's no shortage of things to watch out for.
Wyatt, we were talking to Charles Adler about how the dynamic changes in this presidential race, assuming that Kamala Harris will be the Democratic nominee for president. And a big part of Chuck's comments, he talked about women voters. He talked about people of color, but he talked a lot about the youth vote. You are a young person. What are you noting? What are you picking up on? What are you seeing in the context of what she may do or how she may secure the youth vote?
So it's really interesting. When I was at the presidential debate that I spoke to you from there as well, after I spoke to you, kind of was browsing around, networking with some different people, and there was a lot of young kind of political organizations, political groups there. There was the Young Republicans group was there, and that was one example. And it's interesting because former President Trump has a weird way of connecting with young people. I don't know if maybe it's through TikTok. I don't know it really how it is even happening. I think a lot of the times young people take kind of whatever they see to be factual. And so when they see former President Trump making some of the claims that he does, they kind of automatically assume that it's true. They think, oh, the system's being weaponized against him. Obviously, that's not the case, but that's the messaging that he is pursuing. And so young people in some cases can't really help but believe that. They assume almost as if everything that they see online, for example, should be true. Whereas someone like Vice President Harris, who is more of just like a typical kind of elected official, a typical presidential candidate who has some extra add-ons, so to speak, in the sense of she is a candidate who a lot of people are looking forward to supporting, certainly on the Democratic side. I mean, I know a lot of Democrats are looking forward to being able to put the age issue, the cognitive issue behind them. That was one of the things you and I talked about when I was in Atlanta for the debate.
Yeah.
And we were saying about how maybe the age issue would come up after the debate, depending on how President Biden performed. Of course, it came up. It's what prompted him in many cases to withdraw from the presidential race. And so I do think, though, that Kamala Harris will be able to connect with young people better than President Biden because of her age. She's 59 years old, but perhaps for whatever reason, and I can't quite zone in why it is yet, but perhaps not as good as former President Trump.
You know, oftentimes we'll see it when a political leader announces that they'll resign on a certain date or that they won't seek re-election or what have you. They could be described as being in a bit of a lame duck scenario. Joe Biden is still president of the United States for 3 more months. And then regardless of who wins, there will be a transition period before the inauguration. What's your take on whether or not that is the case? You can look at it on the flip side or from an alternative perspective as though Joe Biden has a number of months yet to cement his legacy or to try to make some meaningful change in areas of high priority to him. Would you describe him, or do you see people describing him as a lame duck president after resigning from the race for 2024, or no?
There's certainly people who are doing that. Republican Congressman Byron Donalds told me earlier that if the president can't serve another 6 months, he shouldn't, if he can't serve another 4 years, he shouldn't be serving for the next 6 months either, and that he should resign. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is calling on him to resign. So certainly all the Republicans are calling on him to resign, but that's really kind of not a surprise, so to speak. But I do think that currently with the president, that's kind of why a lot of people wanted him to resign, because whether it be the CHIPS Act, whether it be the Inflation Reduction Act, like there's a lot of things legislatively that this president has done that Democrats in particular are super proud of, that they think has made a very positive impact on the American people. But they were nervous that by him staying in the race, that it's going to tarnish his reputation. So I think that by him stepping out of the race, you know, and let's face it too, over the course of the last 6 months of an administration, once you get elected, you plan out kind of this is going to happen at this time, this is going to happen at that time, and nothing is really planned to happen during the final 6 months that'll have any meaningful or lasting impact, so to speak. So I don't necessarily, I think him resigning is going to certainly have a positive impact, him withdrawing from the race is going to have a positive impact on his legacy, just again, because it won't be kind of all based off of the fact that he decided to stay in for the race for political reasons, as people had been accusing for the weeks before he made the announcement.
You can, we want our audience to make sure that they subscribe to the Wyatt Sharpe Show on YouTube. That's where everybody can view your interviews, your special features, and some of the interviews, Wyatt, that you're securing are absolutely remarkable. What's one other story that you're going to be covering down in D.C. that we can expect to see on your YouTube channel?
Oh, goodness. I did a bunch of interviews with some people, obviously, on Monday after it was announced that she would be stepping down, or that he would be stepping down. And so there was obviously that. And I did some interviews there in studio with a bunch of different people who were on all sides of the issue, some who wanted him to resign immediately, some who thought he should have stayed in the race. And so really a bunch of different perspectives as it relates to that. So certainly it'll be interesting to wait and see. And then obviously the Israeli stuff. And as I said at the top, there's really no shortage of issues at stake right now.
Wyatt, who did you talk to? Who did you do an interview with right before you talked to us?
Oh, goodness. I honestly, it's been a little while since I was at Capitol Hill yesterday. I was trying to think today. I haven't done any today. I'm going to Capitol Hill later today as well for the address and interview some members of Congress as well.
Didn't you have an interview scheduled? Didn't you have an interview scheduled on C-SPAN this morning?
Oh, right. I did, yes.
Oh,
Sorry, I
you
didn't know if
forgot
that was
about
you.
that, did you? Okay. Hey, man, we're just, and I promise at some point, maybe it'll be like your 21st birthday or your 25th birthday, or I hope we're still talking on your third. At some point, I will stop gushing over how remarkable what you're doing is and how proud we are of you. And for the most part, I keep reminding myself, just talk to him like he's a colleague, because you're a colleague. But what you're doing is absolutely remarkable, literally standing on the grounds of the White House, reporting live here across the country and around the world. Keep up the amazing work, Wyatt, and thank you for giving us a little bit of your time live from Washington, D.C. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Happy to.
Yeah, you got it, buddy. That's Wyatt Sharpe, the host of the Wyatt Sharpe Show. You can make sure you subscribe to him on YouTube. Shout out to Ken, who just hooked us up with a $5 contribution to this YouTube Super Chat. I feel like we should just e-transfer that to Wyatt, because Ken says Wyatt's amazing. His cadence, his tone, his focus, his communication ability in context of his age is so wonderful to watch. Ken says Ian Bremmer needs to hire this young man. Yeah, no kidding. Ian of the Eurasia Group. You've heard him on this show before as well, helping us understand American politics. So there you have it. Another perspective on the youth vote from Wyatt Sharpe. Really, really impressive stuff. Back to what we were talking about with Charles.
What do you mean?
What were you just about to say?
I was going to say, great kid, and I got to catch myself because he's coming of age, and
I should stop
eventually
saying that,
we're
right?
just going to have to be like, here's Wyatt Sharpe. Our he
100%.
He's our equal. He's doing just as much digging, if not more, than we are every single day.
I was just talking to Mehdi Hassan, who said this. I'm like, I'm not talking to Mehdi Hassan. In all seriousness, you want to sort of find that balance, because I find if somebody's finding Real Talk for the first time and they're going, wait a second, what's this? This kid's like 15 years old. What's going on right now? So we got to address it. But at the same time, he's just doing great work. And we're not having him on. We had him on the first time because of his age. We had him on the first time to be like, get a load of this kid. He's going to knock your socks off. And now we just bring him on to provide another perspective. And I see a world, and we've told Wyatt this privately, and I guess now I'll just make it public. I hope that we're doing live hits with him for the next 15 years.
Oh, yeah.
If he's doing what he's doing now, just imagine what he's going to be doing. I mean, he's sitting down with the Prime Minister. He's sitting down with leaders of the official opposition.
Dude,
he's sitting down
at
with
the White House, where he's in Washington, where he should be when this is all going on.
Unbelievable stuff. Dwayne says, imagine him at age 25. What will he be doing then? Probably making us, Johnny and I, feel even more self-conscious about what we were doing at age 15 or 20 or 25.
Hopefully we'll be producing his show by that time.
Yeah, that's right. No kidding. We'll be working for him. What did you? The hockey ticket story, and I want to talk for a second about other news that the Edmonton Oilers have made the day that we're recording this episode, hiring Scotty Bowman's son, Stan Bowman, former GM of the Chicago Blackhawks. It's somewhat of a controversial hire, certainly not the first along those lines for the Edmonton Oilers, who have brought in Evander Kane and Corey Perry and other controversial and polarizing figures. But first, let me ask you about the hockey ticket story. My assessment of it is that it's not inherently bad for a politician to be at a hockey game, but some of the surrounding details, the context of this story, make it a very difficult story, a very awkward story, and potentially a very damaging story for Alberta's premier. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think a hockey ticket is a bribe to an official? Not really, because it's, $200-$300, even if it's $1,000. I mean, like you said, anyone could be bought, but I think
it could be a bit of a reward.
Yes,
though.
exactly.
A bit of a reward.
I think that's what it is. It's not like a carrot on a stick, but it's kind of like, it's a pat on the back. It's a cookie. It's a treat you throw at them, right? To kind of. And but I definitely think I loved Kerry in that chat or in that interview, just kind of pushing the premier and being like, listen, yes, those are the rules, but you created those rules and you made them easier. And now her point is that you're now implementing ways in which you change the rules for you to take advantage of gifts that are smaller, that do go under the radar, right? And we still need to see them. Even if you're following the rules, it's like on our show on Friday. Our guest there was following the rules, but we still wanted to see things. We still wanted to hear what she's spending. And then we showed them on the screen. And I think the changing of the rules there's going to be more stuff like this. There's going to be more tickets, more freebies, more treats, more gifts that we don't ever hear about because the rules have now changed, which I think we should know everything. I mean, Do I think that giving someone hockey tickets is going to sway them one way or the other on voting policy? Not really. But I still want to see everything. I want to see everything that's being given to elected officials for free, especially when it comes from people who have lots of money and have lots of influence.
Alberta Girl says there are very strict rules in most workplaces and government around accepting graft, and it is an obvious kickback. David says market price for playoff tickets are not a couple of $100s. They are way more expensive and very hard to get. It's a pretty rich treat. Let us know what you think about this. I mean, the question is ultimately, and all that really matters to the political strategists is, what does this mean for the politicians? What does this mean for the office? Right? It's a ways away from an election. Probably what the premier is most worried about is her leadership review. I'm speaking off the top of my head. I think it's November 2nd. It's this fall. And, there will be those within the United Conservative Party. And here's where it's not the members of the general public that matter. This is the members of the party. And these are the most ardent and strong and oftentimes most outspoken and most active members. And if a party leader finds themselves at odds with the membership and a leadership vote goes sideways, that can be a real problem. And it doesn't matter if the premier is the leader of a party that has been the legacy party in the province. It doesn't matter if the leader has enjoyed, for the most part, solid numbers, solid polling, solid popularity. It doesn't even particularly matter what the leader's track record looks like. If the leader of the party loses the membership during the membership review, that's a real problem for that leader, and ultimately that can be a real problem for the party. So this is a story that we'll keep an eye on. We'll look to your emails on this, and of course we'll continue to bring you the updates as that story develops. This story, and again, not a sports show, but that doesn't mean we don't talk sports from time to time, in particular when sports and life intersect. News breaking just a short time, about 30 minutes before we went live on this streaming episode of Real Talk, that the Edmonton Oilers have replaced Ken Holland, their former general manager, with Stan Bowman. Of course, the son of the legendary Scotty Bowman and the former general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks. Stan Bowman and the former Blackhawks coach, Joel Quenneville, have been out of the league, not by their choice, but out of the league, banned from the National Hockey League for the past couple of years for the role that they played, or what they didn't do, perhaps, during the Chicago Blackhawks, or throughout the Chicago Blackhawks sexual assault scandal. This is one that has plagued the team for the better part of the last 14 years. In particular, that story surfacing a short time ago when a former Chicago Blackhawks prospect, Kyle Beach, went public with his allegations relating to the Chicago Blackhawks video coach. It's certainly tainted the legacy of that Chicago Blackhawks dynasty. It has tainted the dynasty of the Chicago Blackhawks captain, Jonathan Toews, and others. So the Oilers bring in Stan Bowman. He's been reinstated to the league by Commissioner Gary Bettman. You could look at it as though he has paid his dues. He has done his time, so to speak, sitting out in arguably in the prime of his career. He's a relatively young executive. By that I mean he's under the age of 60. And the Edmonton Oilers see an opportunity to bring in a general manager that his managerial skills were never in question. He's a Stanley Cup winning general manager. But this, of course, sort of adds to the narrative that the Edmonton Oilers, perhaps in this context, a bit of an opportunistic team. They saw an opportunity when polarizing winger Evander Kane. Most teams didn't want to touch him with a 10-foot pole, going through a nasty and messy divorce amid allegations of abuse. Corey Perry, who was cut loose in a not unprecedented but highly unusual circumstance, having his contract essentially torn up by the Chicago Blackhawks in a story where the details have not gone public. And we're not at liberty to share details that we've heard through the rumor mill, but it's been alleged that there was an inappropriate relationship, that there was harassment, allegedly, between Corey Perry and somebody involved in the Chicago Blackhawks organization. I don't have to tell you that the Edmonton Oilers just re-upped Corey Perry. Of course, and now bringing in Stan Bowman. Bit of a tough look for the team. Ultimately, you look at what sports fans think, and it's tough to characterize an entire fan base or paint an entire fan base with one brush. But a lot of fans will tell you all they care about is whether or not their team, their National Hockey League club, wins the Stanley Cup. And so on this, the team president, Jeff Jackson, obviously believing that Stan Bowman is the team's best choice to help them further their goal to win one more playoff game than they did last year and to win the Stanley Cup. But obviously, you're going to have members of this fan base, you're going to have members of the general public wondering if there's a bridge that the Edmonton Oilers won't cross in bringing in polarizing figures that come with baggage, that come with controversy. And I won't be surprised to see some of the critics, the loudest ones online today, decrying this hiring.
Sure. And I'll not be careful, but I work with the Oilers
closely. You work
closely,
with the team.
But I've been on here. I've talked about Kane. I've talked about Corey Perry. And, I'll just play the other side of it. People call them an opportunistic team, but, real fans, not all of them, but true fans who, like you said, just want to see wins, just want to see the Stanley Cup, would not say they're opportunistic. They would say they're a second chance team. And that's what they've given a lot of players who, have turned things around. Patrick Kane's one of them where he has stayed out of trouble for a while. Does that mean he's changed 100%? I don't know. I don't know him personally. I don't know what therapy he's going to, whether he's been to Gamblers Anonymous, whatever it is. But I would say that. Some people would call them opportunistic. Others would say they're a second chance organization.
Yeah, and I believe that people deserve second chances. I believe that 2 years outside of your field, your profession, would be for most people enough time to prompt meaningful reflection and change in behavior. And you have to assume that the Oilers have interviewed Stan Bowman, I would suggest probably multiple times, and asked him directly about this. And you have to assume that they've seen enough or that they've heard enough to lead them to believe that Mr. Bowman will not be a liability, but rather a boon for this franchise. Again, you can let us know what you think on this. People have questions about the Kane. So Johnny's referencing Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane with the Chicago Blackhawks, much controversy through the years. You can search it yourself. Rape allegations, beating up a cabbie, throwing change at him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Evander Kane, a completely different story. It was a tough stretch for the Canes.
I was just going to say both Canes.
Both Canes.
It doesn't matter which one I'm talking about. Really.
Yeah, Lauren says, I like second chances for most, not all. Jillian says the thing about second chances is who in our society gets them and who doesn't. And I think that's a very insightful comment as well.
And this is just the thing, like everyone puts athletes on a pedestal, and as they should, they're role models, but they're just human beings. So you've got hundreds of people playing a professional sport, making millions of dollars. Some of them are going to make mistakes. Some of them are going to let money go to their head. Some of them are going to do whatever. Does that mean we give them a pass? Not at all. I don't say that, but I do believe that, and I've said this before, I think this about everyone, that everyone can be rehabilitated. Aside from a few that I think, who abuse women, children, and animals, I think there are people who can turn things around. So will Scotty Bowman come out there and make a big impact on the Oilers? I don't know. I think they're already where they need to be. Like they've made all the changes they have already. Will a new GM, skyrocket them to something else? How many more notches up can you go? You went to game set. You were 1 win, 1 goal away from the Stanley Cup. Yeah. So I don't know if this hurts or does better for them, unless, like you're talking about, people's opinion come into play.
Yeah, Tobias in the chat says, I hate the Bowman hiring more than anything. I know a
lot of people were tweeting.
Well, a lot of people have felt like Jeff Jackson, who was Connor McDavid's agent for a long time.
He didn't want it,
though.
He didn't want it.
I know he didn't want it, but he was doing a hell of a job.
What a smart guy,
I think a lot of people are looking at his at the draft, and people were looking at the Oilers on free agency and bringing in Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner and other players, and just sort of wondering if we even needed a general manager. Darren says the problem is the position of GM is all about relationships and networking. People don't want to be associated with this guy, with Bowman, so he won't be able to effectively do his job. Darren, I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure that people don't want to be associated with Stan Bowman. I think that people have probably taken an appropriate period of time away. I mean, you look at those guys were left to kind of float on their own, both Bowman and Joel Quenneville, let's call it what it was. They turned a blind eye to these allegations. They turned a blind eye to the story. And I know that everybody has their own opinions on what was the appropriate response to that. This was a team back in the day, back in 2010, that was on its way to winning the Stanley Cup. And this is coming up. This is surfacing. These allegations are being made within the organization during the Cup run. done. And people have wondered, well, what role should a captain, should Jonathan Toews have played? What role should the coach have played? What role should the GM have played? And I think we can all agree, and the National Hockey League certainly agreed, that they needed to do more. They needed to do way more. But I'm not convinced that nobody in the hockey world wants to talk to or be associated with Stan Bowman. Here he is back. It'll be interesting, very interesting to see if Joel Quenneville is hired again. He's one of the most successful, one of the winningest
well, now
coaches
that this has happened
in NHL history.
I mean, we didn't
and
think
like you
we'd
say,
see Bowman again.
Yeah. So,
it's
if,
just,
if
hear
Joel
the
Quenneville gets another chance, that'll say a lot.
Yeah, you hear the Chicago Blackhawks, you immediately think of one thing, right? So that's the stain that will always follow these guys, no matter if Stan Bowman, if the Oilers win the Stanley Cup this year, whenever you hear Stan Bowman's name, you will still think of all the scandals that happened while he was at the Chicago Blackhawks. So.
Yeah. Tracy in the chat asking an important question. She says, do people that are accused, falsely or otherwise, never, ever get to clear their own names? Heaven forbid, says Tracy, somebody accuses me of something that stays with me forever, regardless of what I did or didn't do. Well, Ken, different Ken, says, I guess that we can hope that Stan Bowman made an error in judgment and that he's learned from that error. So there you go. Dwayne says if the Oilers can keep up this momentum, the Stanley Cup will be theirs.
And we're not accusing. These things did happen.
They did
Stan
happen.
Bowman's watch. So there's no question.
The National Hockey League
it's
did
not
an
an accusation. It happened.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. But the question remains: who deserves a second chance? Who doesn't? And I'll defer to Jillian's comment because I like that. Everybody deserves a second chance. Not everybody gets it. Talk at RyanJesperson.com is where you can find us. We're going to take a look at the Jasper wildfires, and then we're going to wrap up this episode with something very meaningful. But I want to let you know first that this episode is happening with the support of Complete Care Restoration. Listen, Mother Nature can bring a number of challenges, whether it's your residence, your business, or otherwise. Sometimes it's an entire community that's impacted by wildfire, by flood. It could be smoke damage. It could be mold, asbestos, you name it. Sometimes it's cleanup after a traumatic situation. The team at Complete Care Restoration for more than 25 years has been restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. If you find yourself in a difficult situation like one we've described, don't leave it to just anybody and don't try to take it on yourself. Trust the team at Complete Care Restoration. You can contact them today. They're ready to respond 24/7 at CompleteCareRestoration.ca.
Yeah, Jeff Jackson, just before we move on, just a smart, like all the smartest guys in hockey, I think, have gone to law school. I feel like Gary Bettman gets a bad rap too, but everything he's done, and just lawyers, they're quick, they're smart, they get things done fast, they show results immediately. And Jeff Jackson was just, oh my God, he's a hometown favorite now, even if he didn't accept the GM role.
Yeah, people have been very happy with his performance to this date, to be sure. This is a real gut punch scenario. We wanted to touch on this and just acknowledge this. There's not a lot to say at this point, except for that we are thinking about everybody, friends of ours. A lot of times it's visitors internationally, visitors from across the country that head out to Jasper National Park into the summer. The summer months, you could argue, I mean, there's nothing like Jasper in the winter as far as I'm concerned, but Jasper in the summer, this is high season. This is when every resort, every cabin is sold out. This is when the golf course is packed. This is when the rafts are out on the river. This is when the hiking trails see more boots than any other time of year, but all of Jasper evacuated as wildfire crews are battling a blaze that is threatening the town. Right now, this is a horrific situation, and obviously we just wanted to touch on this. Typically on Wednesdays, we'll bring you My Jasper Memories, presented by our friends at Tourism Jasper. Right now, their team and everybody else is the hell out of there as crews continue to work on this fire and keep it as best they can isolated away from the town. The Instagram account Yag Wave has some remarkable video that's been submitted by people that were presumably evacuating on their way out through Highway 93A, Highway 16 as well. There's nobody there now, but Johnny, as you can see, this is both sides of the highway. This thing is ripping, and this is a real gut punch. We've come to see wildfire as somewhat of a regular, I hate to use the word normal, but a normal part of our summers. the haze right now in our home city of Edmonton. I know across Western Canada right now, and I'm sure that Real Talkers in Central and Eastern Canada are noticing this as well. But a big part of that, a big source of that, is this wildfire just outside Jasper. But once these fires, and I'm not writing off the impact of fires in the middle of nowhere in the boreal forest, but once we see towns and cities threatened, it's when you really start to get that sick feeling, that pit in your stomach. You think of communities like Slave Lake, you think of communities in British Columbia, you think of Fort McMurray, obviously, and others. And our thoughts, we just wanted to note that our thoughts are with our friends in Jasper, Alberta right now, and the firefighters that are on the front line trying to keep this thing at bay.
And all communities that are involved in wildfires matters, but it really hurts when somewhere like Jasper, where people used to escape. We all know the beauty of Jasper. We've all been there. We hear about these small towns or wherever that are experiencing fire. We think, okay, our hearts are with them, but Jasper is a place where it's very close to you and me and a lot of other people, as a place to get away, a place to turn off your cell phone, escape the office, escape work, escape all the stresses of life. So to see it on fire right now is just, it's really heartbreaking. Not that it takes away from any other fire, but it just hurts a lot.
Yeah, Jillian's talking about how her family was just in Banff. She says, I can't imagine what it would be like for families that are on vacation right now in Jasper. I mean, you think of this, like the evacuation, number one, for people that live there. And I think of people that have pets. I think of people that have businesses there. There's that. But then there's also the people that have waited all year. And I mean, you can get over the disappointment of a family vacation going sideways, but even just the logistics of it. We've seen some remarkable, situations like this one. Anna, and I recognize this name, happen to know that Anna, who's Savage Yag on Twitter, is a real talker. Look at this. I mean, this is just one example of many. She tweets on the 23rd of July, does anyone from Jasper need a place to stay in Edmonton? She says, we have a fully developed basement with enough room for a family, and she tags us and politician Janice Irwin and others. This is just one example of how people will step forward and do what they can. I know that community halls are going to do this. Church communities will do this, and others. If you're looking for more information, a good place to turn is the Tourism Jasper Instagram account. They've got links there for updates on that Jasper wildfire. They've got information for visitors that were evacuated, as well as Jasper residents. And this is a story we'll stay on top of. Obviously, a big part of our hearts is in Jasper, and that's obvious on the show, I think, each and every week. We wrap up the first episode of every week, courtesy of our friends at Kuby Energy, with a chance to focus on the positive. And this one's going to be a little bit different. Real Talk took a couple of days off, and there's a reason why I've saved this to the end of the show. This is because our family is in mourning right now as we said goodbye to our dear boy, to our beautiful boxer, Moses. And so, Johnny, today on this special episode of Positive Reflections presented by Kuby Renewable Energy, I wanted to give an ode to Moses, if you would. You want to maybe give me some music underneath this just so I can do this proper and honor this boy? Moses, the most magnificent pup, crossed the Rainbow Bridge on July 22nd. And for 12 years, we were so very blessed to share life with this beautiful boy. Now, I'm biased, obviously, but I'm probably not alone. Johnny, you knew him too, in saying that
great guy.
Moses brought more to the mix than your average dog. From his boisterous and breathtaking magnificence in youth to his noble and dignified presence through the back nine, Moses endeared himself to everybody he met, including our two baby boys, the humans, Wyatt and Noah, who arrived as Moses's human brothers. Moses was also my first dog, and it's impossible for me to describe the many ways that he impacted and changed my life forever. We know, and our son Wyatt said this just a short time after Moses died peacefully at home, surrounded by the five of us, that nothing will ever be the same now that he's gone. And while we would give anything to hear the click of his nails walking up the stairs again, or the slurping at his water bowl, there was no other dog. There is no other dog on planet Earth that crushed water quite like Moses. It was like turning on a sprinkler inside the house. Or, of course, that beautiful boxer wine. If you own a boxer or know a boxer, you know what I'm talking about. The wine that would stop us in our tracks to deliver a treat or to scratch behind his ears. Moses' paw prints are permanently etched on our hearts, and we will love him forever. God only knows where we'd be without Mo. I want to encourage you today to snuggle your pup, to shoot some video of your dogs or cats with your babies, to take a second to let your furry and feathered friends know how much you appreciate them and how much more rich your life is made by having them as part of it. I'll love Moses forever. There will be no other dog that will ever make an influence or imprint on my life quite like he did. I've already checked with our lab, Monroe. She's okay with me saying that. She gets what it's like, that first dog relationship. So here's to the pups in our lives, and here's to positive reflections that get us through the most difficult weeks. Our thanks to Kuby Energy for presenting this segment each and every week. You can get a free solar quote today at kubyenergy.ca. And if this has you reflecting on your relationship with that special animal in your life, we'd love to hear about it. To talk at ryanjesperson.com. We have a fun and special episode of Real Talk coming up tomorrow titled They Said What? It's a Real Talk Top 10. And then we have a political roundtable coming up on Friday you won't want to miss. Thanks for being a part of this episode, friends. Thanks for subscribing to Real Talk on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And while Vamp Fashions may be correct in the chat that it may take 3 days for somebody to find Real Talk for the first time, you can change that by sharing this episode or your favorite clips with your friends and telling them why you join us and those other thousands of Real Talkers every single day, talking news, politics, pop culture, and the stories that really matter. One love, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.